Hello. I'm Li Hao. Today I'm going to talk about components and props. You probably have seen me done this. You have seen me adding a component into another Svelte components. And I promised you back then that I would make another video to talk about this in more detail. So the time is now. I'm going to talk about components in more detail. So here I have a component called app.svelte, and I have another component called component.svelte. Bad naming, but bear with me. So here, to use this component, what I do is I need to import from this file. Right, this REPL allows us to create multiple tabs, and this is actually multiple files in your file system if you are developing locally. So each of them are named .svelte. So you have to import it to use in your component. So you can come here and say import component from component.svelte. So one thing to take note is that you're importing from a default export. So this is one key thing about a .svelte file, is that your component itself will be a class, and then it will be an export default. So you import it from the default exports, and to use it, you use it like any other elements. You can brackets and then say component. So one thing to differentiate between what is a component and what is an element, because you could write something like this, and how does Svelte knows that whether this is a component or an element? So the differentiator is that component starts with a capital letter, and element starts with a lower case letter. So I believe this is quite prevalent in other frameworks as well. Anything that starts with a capital letter is always a component. Anything that starts with a lowercase will be a element. So this is how I use my components, and I'm not sure you're paying attention to me speaking, or you actually are looking at the screen, because at the screen right now you already see a component, right? This is the components that I've written over here. If I change it, say hello, then yeah, you can see that over here, reflected over here, this is the components. And I can create multiple components if I want. They will be created this way. And there's no limit in your components where how many top levels elements, right? There's no such thing, right? You can have multiple divs as you want. Come over here, I have like 2 divs, 3 divs. Okay, I don't think we can see a difference. So let's say 1, 2, 3. You can have as many divs, as many top level elements in one component as you want. There's no limit at all. What's the point, right? So here you have components, 4 components, and I create this. Then having a components in your in your components, having a nested components in your components is not that fun at all if you just show like content that it has, right? You can have logics in your component itself, but what's great about what's more interesting is what if you can pass the data from I will call this the parent components to the child components, right? I call this a parent and this component is a child because parents bear a child, right? So anything that is used inside is considered a child component by this current component, which is called the parent. So you can pass data from parent to the child. How? Pass it by we call it props. So same thing as how you will pass things, attributes to elements, you can pass attributes to components, and we call it props, right? We don't call it attributes, we call it props. So you can pass something like over here I have name, right? So I can pass name to the component as props. And same thing that you need to remember as well is that same as how you can write attribute shorthand, you can have shorthand for props as well. So this and this are the same. If the attribute name and the value variable name is the same, you can do it this way. So how do I receive it within the child component? Well, of course, probably I have something like a variable, right? I need to receive it into a variable. And how do I make this variable a props? well, you use exports. So use exports let name. Then this way what you define is this name is the props. So you have to follow exactly the name itself, right? If you come over here and say Nami, then this is not the props that you're passing in. You are passing in something else. So you can only pass. You have to make sure that this name and this is the same. Okay, and once I do that, I can come over here and use it. Right, I'm gonna say component. I'm gonna put it a div so that you can see clearly. Right, so I said div component and a name. So I pass wool for the first two cases. And over here, I didn't pass it because I call it Nami. Nami is something else. I don't know what it is. And this, I didn't pass anything, so I get undefined as well. Right? It does not have to be a variable. You can pass it with like a string. Right? This works as well. So what if the case that you didn't pass, but you want to have a default value? So anytime when you don't pass something, but I want to show a default value, what do I do? Well, it's like defining a variable. Like right now you're defining a variable. What do you do to provide a default value for the variable before you do some changes? Well, you set something, right? So you come over here and say default, say Svelte is amazing. Then this will be the default value. And as you can see over here, the last component does not pass in anything, does not pass in name. Then the name will have the default value, which is Svelte is amazing. It is amazing, it isn't. If it feels amazing, click like on the video. So we've seen how you can create props. You can have default value of the props. And one thing I want to show you is a lot of times we are lazy. So we like to do things lazily. So what if I have over here is this component, I have two props, export let name and then export let email. So I'm gonna have default email address as well, blah@blah.com, and I'm gonna say email, right? And I'm lazy in a sense where what if I have an object that has name Li Hao and email Li Hao at lihao.com. This is not a real email. Don't email me to this address. So what if you have this object and you want to add it to your component? You would have to basically come over here and say object.name email equals to object.email, right? This is what you have learned so far. This is what you have to do. But humans are lazy, and lazy humans come up with lazy ways to work around things. If you remember cases where if you have an object and you want to copy some of the properties to a target object, you can spread the values, the properties of the object over, right? So if I have a target and I want to copy everything from here, I can do a spread. Right, so same idea goes. I can come over here and can copy this because I'm going to prove it's the same thing. I can come over, copy this, and I'm going to paste it in over here. So this spreads the object into the props. As you can see, let me comment this out. This is the one that we already spread the objects into the props. And so it has name and email, so it's spread and you get name and email over here. Of course, you don't. I think this is a bit ugly to me. It's hurting my eyes. Usually, I write it within just one line so that it looks concise and compact. So I can come over here and write this. You can spread props. So what we have learned so far: components, imports components, default exports. You write props. How do you create props? Exports. Syntax allows you to create props. And then default props. As long as you define the props with a value, that is the default value if the props is not passed in. And we have seen how you can be lazy, spread your props into the components using this syntax where you spread like an object, right? Like how you will spread an object, you come over here and do the same thing. 3 dots and it's spreaded. So any questions, comments down below. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. And do remember, subscribe to my channel so that you get notified when the next one is out. So see ya, bye bye.